It was the kind of sentence that slices right through you, leaving you gasping for air you can't quite catch. My own mother, the woman who'd held my hand through every scraped knee and heartbreak, was looking at me like I was a stranger. My name is Sarah, and for the first 32 years of my life, my mother, Carol, was my rock. We weren't perfect, no family is, but we had a bond that I always thought was unbreakable. Just the two of us against the world after my dad passed away when I was still in high school. We leaned on each other, shared secrets whispered late into the night, and navigated life's ups and downs as a team. I always admired her strength, the way she managed to keep going even when things got tough. She worked tirelessly to provide for us, and I never doubted her love for me. That's why what happened last year felt like such a betrayal, a punch to the gut that I'm still reeling from. It all started subtly, with little things that I initially brushed off as stress, or maybe just me being overly sensitive. Mom had started spending a lot of time with her new friend, Eleanor. They'd met at a pottery class, and at first I was happy for her. After Dad died, Mom's social life had dwindled, and Eleanor seemed to bring a spark back into her eyes. Eleanor was, well, she was something else. Always impeccably dressed, with a booming laugh and a way of talking that made every story sound like the most exciting thing that had ever happened. She was also incredibly opinionated and had a knack for making everything about her. I tried to like her for Mom's sake, but there was something about Eleanor that always rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was the way she'd subtly put me down, or the way she seemed to monopolize Mom's attention whenever we were together. The little things started adding up. Mom would cancel our usual Sunday brunch because she had plans with Eleanor. Our evening phone calls became shorter, often interrupted by Eleanor needing Mom for something. It felt like Eleanor was slowly but surely pushing me out of my mom's life. I tried to talk to Mom about it, but she'd just wave her hand dismissively. "Don't be silly, Sarah," she'd say. "Eleanor's just a friend. You're being paranoid." But I wasn't paranoid. I could feel the shift. It was like a cold draft had entered our once warm and cozy relationship. Then came the incident with the antique brooch. It was a family heirloom, something that had belonged to my grandmother, and Mom had always cherished it. She kept it locked away in her jewelry box and only wore it on special occasions. One afternoon, I was visiting Mom, and I noticed the brooch was missing from its usual spot. "Mom, where's Grandma's brooch?" I asked, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. She looked flustered. "Oh, that," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Eleanor admired it so much, I lent it to her for a party." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You lent Grandma's brooch to Eleanor? Mom, you never let anyone touch that." "Well, Eleanor's different," she said defensively. "She promised to be careful with it." A wave of anger washed over me. It wasn't just about the brooch, it was about the principle. It felt like Mom was prioritizing her new friend over our family traditions and memories. "Mom, that brooch is irreplaceable. What if something happens to it?" "Nothing's going to happen to it," she snapped. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." That was the first time we really argued about Eleanor. I tried to explain how I felt, how it seemed like she was coming between us, but Mom wouldn't hear it. She accused me of being jealous and controlling, and the fight ended with me storming out of her house, feeling hurt and confused. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Mom and me grew. Our communication became strained, filled with awkward silences and stilted conversations. I missed our easy banter, our shared laughter, the feeling of being truly connected. I started to wonder if I'd ever get that back. Then, about a month ago, Mom called me, her voice sounding unusually tense. "Sarah, can you come over? I need to talk to you about something." I hesitated. After our last fight, I wasn't sure I was ready for another confrontation. But there was a desperation in her voice that I couldn't ignore. "Okay, Mom. I'll be there in an hour." When I arrived at her house, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Eleanor was there too, sitting across from her with a smug look on her face that immediately put me on edge. "Thanks for coming, Sarah," Mom said, her eyes darting nervously between me and Eleanor. "We have a bit of a situation." "A situation?" I asked, my eyebrows raised. Eleanor jumped in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Yes, dear, it's about my little accident." She proceeded to tell a story about how she'd been at a charity gala the previous weekend and had tripped and fallen, breaking her ankle. She'd also apparently damaged a very expensive necklace that she'd borrowed from a friend for the event. "It's a disaster!" Eleanor wailed, dramatically clutching her chest. "The necklace is worth a fortune and my friend is absolutely furious." I listened to her story, a sense of unease growing in my gut. Something about it didn't feel right. Eleanor was known for exaggerating, and this whole thing sounded a bit too dramatic even for her. Then Mom chimed in, her voice laced with worry. "The thing is, Eleanor doesn't have the money to replace the necklace, and her friend is threatening to sue." I looked at Mom, confused. "Okay, but what does this have to do with me?" That's when Mom dropped the bomb. "Well, Eleanor suggested that we could say she was at my house the night of the gala. That way, she wouldn't have been able to borrow the necklace and her friend wouldn't have a case." I stared at her, my mouth agape. "You want me to lie for her? Mom, are you serious?" Eleanor jumped in again, her tone suddenly sharp. "It's just a little white lie, dear. No one would get hurt, and it would really help me out of a tight spot." "A little white lie?" I repeated, incredulously. "Mom, this isn't a little white lie. This is perjury. We could get into serious trouble." "Don't be so dramatic, Sarah," Mom said, her voice rising. "Eleanor is my friend, and she needs our help." "Our help?" I scoffed. "Or your help? Mom, you barely know this woman, and you're willing to risk everything for her?" "She's been a better friend to me than you have been lately," Mom retorted, her words hitting me like a slap in the face. The air in the kitchen crackled with tension. I looked from Mom to Eleanor, a sickening realization dawning on me. Eleanor had somehow managed to completely manipulate my mother, turning her against me, making her believe that her new friend was more important than her own daughter. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I can't do this. I won't lie for her. It's wrong." Mom's face hardened. "So, you're just going to let Eleanor get sued? You're going to stand by and do nothing?" "I'll help Eleanor in any way I can, Mom, but I won't lie. We could offer her some financial assistance, maybe help her find a lawyer." "That's not good enough," Eleanor shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "I need a solid alibi, and your mother is willing to give it to me. Why can't you just go along with it?" "Because it's wrong," I repeated, my voice now firm. "I won't compromise my integrity for anyone, not even for you, Eleanor." Mom stood up, her eyes blazing with anger. "Then maybe you're not the daughter I thought you were," she said, her voice cold and hard. "If you can't support me in this, then maybe you should just leave." Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. I stared at her, tears welling up in my eyes. Had our relationship really come to this? Was she really willing to throw me away for this woman she'd only known for a few months? "Fine, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If that's what you want." I turned and walked out of her house, leaving her standing there with Eleanor. As I drove away, the tears finally started to fall. I couldn't believe what had just happened. My own mother had essentially disowned me for refusing to lie for her manipulative friend. It felt like my whole world had just been turned upside down. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to understand how things had gone so wrong. I tried calling Mom a few times, but she didn't answer. I even sent her a few texts, explaining my feelings and begging her to see reason. But she didn't respond to those either. It was like I'd been completely cut off. My best friend Lisa was a huge support during this time. I told her everything that had happened, and she was just as shocked and appalled as I was. "I never liked that Eleanor woman," she said. "I knew she was trouble. Your mom has completely lost her mind." Lisa tried to convince me to give Mom some time, to let her cool down. But deep down, I knew this was more than just a temporary argument. Something had fundamentally shifted in our relationship, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. A week later, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture, a screenshot of a social media post. It was from Eleanor, and it was a picture of her and Mom, all smiles at some fancy restaurant. The caption read, "Having a wonderful dinner with my dear friend Carol. So grateful for her support during this difficult time. True friends are the best." Below the picture, Mom had commented, "Love you, Eleanor. So glad we have each other." Seeing that picture felt like another punch in the gut. It was like they were deliberately trying to rub it in my face. My own mother, who wouldn't even return my calls, was out having a grand time with Eleanor, acting like nothing was wrong. I felt a surge of anger, followed by a deep wave of sadness. It was clear that Mom had made her choice, and it wasn't me. She had chosen Eleanor over her own daughter. The realization was devastating. I knew I couldn't keep dwelling on it. I had to move on, to try and build a life for myself without Mom's constant presence. It wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't see any other option. A few more weeks passed, and I hadn't heard anything from Mom. I decided to try one last time. I wrote her a letter, pouring out my heart, explaining how much she meant to me and how hurt I was by her actions. I told her that I understood she wanted to help Eleanor, but that I couldn't condone lying. I ended the letter by saying that I loved her, and that I hoped we could find a way to repair our relationship someday. I mailed the letter and waited, my heart filled with a mixture of hope and dread. Days turned into a week, and then another, but I didn't receive a response. It seemed like my words had fallen on deaf ears. That's when I knew, deep down, that things had changed forever. My mother, the woman who had always been my rock, had chosen someone else over me, and all because I refused to lie for her new best friend. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I knew I had to accept it. My life had taken an unexpected and painful turn, and I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I deserved better than to be asked to compromise my integrity for someone who clearly didn't value me. Life went on, as it always does, even when you feel like your world has stopped turning. I focused on my work, spent more time with Lisa, and tried to find some semblance of normalcy in my new reality. The silence from Mom's end was deafening. It was like I had ceased to exist in her world. Then, about 2 months after our argument, I received a frantic call from Mom late one evening. Her voice was choked with tears, barely coherent. "Sarah. Oh, Sarah, you were right." My heart leaped into my throat. "Mom, what's wrong? What happened?" "It's Eleanor. She's gone. And she took everything." I struggled to make sense of her jumbled words. "Took what? What are you talking about?" Through sobs, Mom managed to explain. It turned out that Eleanor's broken ankle and the borrowed necklace were all part of an elaborate con. There was no charity gala, no expensive necklace, and no furious friend. Eleanor had fabricated the entire story to get Mom to lie for her, likely as a test of loyalty or control. But that wasn't the worst of it. Over the past few months, Eleanor had systematically manipulated Mom, borrowing money for various emergencies, convincing her to invest in a lucrative business opportunity that turned out to be a scam, and even persuading her to take out a significant loan to help a family member in need. Every sob that racked Mom's body felt like a fresh stab wound to my own heart. "She cleaned me out, Sarah," Mom wailed. "My savings, everything, even the money I had set aside for retirement. It's all gone." A cold fury washed over me. Eleanor, that viper, had not only driven a wedge between Mom and me, but had also financially devastated her. "Mom, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I told you there was something about her I didn't trust." "I should have listened to you," Mom sobbed. "You were right all along. She was just using me, and I was so blind, so foolish." The irony wasn't lost on me. Mom had accused me of being paranoid and jealous, but it turned out my instincts were spot on. Eleanor was exactly the kind of person I had suspected she was, a manipulative user who preyed on vulnerable people. "Mom, where are you?" I asked, my concern growing. "Are you okay?" She was at home, alone and terrified. I immediately told her I was on my way. The drive to her house felt like it took an eternity. My mind raced with a mixture of anger at Eleanor and a deep sense of sadness and guilt for Mom. Guilt because I hadn't been able to convince her sooner, sadness because she was now facing such a devastating situation. When I arrived, Mom was a mess. Her face was blotchy and tear-stained, her eyes red and swollen. The house felt empty, not just because Eleanor was gone, but because the sense of security and comfort Mom had always exuded was nowhere to be found. I held her as she cried, letting her get it all out. It took hours for her to calm down enough to tell me the full extent of Eleanor's deception. It was even worse than I had imagined. Eleanor had not only stolen her money but had also isolated her from her friends and family, making her completely dependent on her. She even convinced me to stop going to my book club, Mom confessed, shame evident in her voice. She said they were all just gossiping behind my back and that she was the only one I could truly trust. My blood boiled. Eleanor had systematically dismantled Mom's life, piece by piece. "Mom, we need to go to the police," I said firmly. "We need to report this." It took some convincing, but eventually Mom agreed. The next day we went to the police station and filed a report. The detective who took our case listened patiently to Mom's story, his expression growing increasingly grim. He told us that Eleanor was likely a professional con artist and that she had probably done this to other people as well. He promised to do everything he could to track her down, but he warned us that the chances of recovering the money were slim. In the days and weeks that followed, I spent a lot of time with Mom, helping her pick up the pieces of her shattered life. We contacted her bank, her investment advisors, and tried to assess the full extent of the damage. It was significant. Mom's financial future looked bleak. The emotional toll on her was even greater. She was filled with shame and regret, constantly berating herself for being so gullible. I tried my best to comfort her, reminding her that she was a victim of a skilled manipulator, and that anyone could have fallen for Eleanor's lies. One evening, as we were sitting in her living room, the silence broken only by the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, Mom turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, I am so sorry," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. I let that woman come between us, and I almost lost you." My heart ached for her. Despite everything that had happened, she was still my mother, and seeing her in so much pain was unbearable. "It's okay, Mom," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "What's important now is that we're here for each other. We'll get through this, together." A small, fragile smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Sarah. You're a good daughter. I don't deserve you." "Don't say that, Mom," I said, squeezing her hand. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them." In the aftermath of Eleanor's betrayal, our relationship slowly began to heal. The cold draft that had entered our lives was gradually replaced by the warmth of understanding and forgiveness. Mom started reaching out more, asking for my advice and company. We started our Sunday brunches again, and our evening phone calls became longer and more meaningful. It wasn't easy. The financial damage Eleanor had inflicted was significant, and Mom had to make some tough decisions about her future. She ended up selling her house, the house I had grown up in, because she could no longer afford the mortgage. It was a painful loss for both of us, but we faced it together. Mom moved into a smaller apartment closer to me, and we started rebuilding her life, one step at a time. I helped her manage her finances, find a new support group, and reconnect with old friends. It was a long and arduous process, but seeing her strength and resilience shine through reminded me of the woman I had always admired. As for Eleanor, the police eventually tracked her down in another state. She had been running similar scams on other vulnerable individuals. She was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and theft. Mom had to testify against her in court, which was incredibly difficult, but she did it with courage and dignity. Eleanor was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. The trial brought a sense of closure for Mom, but the scars of Eleanor's betrayal would likely remain for a long time. However, through it all, our bond as mother and daughter had been reforged, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Looking back, I realized that sometimes, the most painful experiences can lead to the most profound growth. I learned the importance of trusting my instincts, even when they go against what others might say. I also learned the true meaning of family and the unwavering power of a mother-daughter bond. Mom and I still have our ups and downs, as all families do. But the experience with Eleanor taught us the importance of open communication, mutual respect, and unconditional love. We learned that true friendship is based on honesty and trust, not manipulation and deceit. And while I will never forget the pain of the words Mom spoke that day, she said I wasn't her daughter anymore. I also know that those words ultimately led us back to each other, stronger and more connected than we had ever been. We faced a storm together, and while we were both battered and bruised, we emerged on the other side with a deeper appreciation for the unbreakable bond that ties us together. Life has a funny way of throwing unexpected challenges our way, but it's how we navigate those challenges and the lessons we learn along the way that truly define us. And in the end, despite the heartache and betrayal, I wouldn't trade the lessons I learned for anything, because they brought me closer to the woman who, despite a temporary lapse in judgment, will always be my mother.